What if I told you that one of the greatest dynasties in basketball history was built on the back of a man whose life was completely falling apart? Before he was a three-time MVP, before he became the cold-blooded assassin who terrorized the NBA, he was a broken college dropout. He was a kid working on the back of a garbage truck in a tiny town nobody had ever heard of, convinced his basketball dreams were dead forever. But what happened next shocked everyone. Enter Bill Hodges. He was the assistant coach at Indiana State who simply refused to let legendary, once-in-a-generation talent rot away on a local municipal garbage route. Hodges drove all the way down to French Lick, tracked Larry down, and looked him dead in the eye. He told him he was making a historic mistake. He told him he belonged on a basketball court, not hauling trash cans in the freezing rain. Larry, tired of running from his destiny, finally agreed to step back into the light. Now, Larry didn't just play for Indiana State. He completely took over college basketball. He took a completely unknown, small-time school that nobody cared about and transformed them into an absolute, unstoppable juggernaut. He was playing with an insane, borderline psychotic intensity. He was diving headfirst for loose balls, screaming at his teammates, pulling down 10 rebounds a game, and passing with a telepathic vision the world had never seen from a guy his size. The Sycamores started winning and winning and winning. Before anyone knew what was happening, this small-town kid had led his team to a flawless, perfect 33-0 regular season record. But in 1979, everything changed. The NCAA championship game. To this day, it remains the most watched college basketball game in the history of the world. But it wasn't just a match for a trophy. It was the birth of an absolute war. Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson. It was the introverted, stone-faced country boy against the flashy, smiling city phenom. Magic won that first historic battle, handing Larry a brutal 75-64 loss and leaving him completely heartbroken. Larry had poured his entire soul into that season, only to watch his rivals skate away with the crown. And this was only the beginning. Behind the scenes, the legendary Red Auerbach and the Boston Celtics had already sneakily drafted Larry a whole year prior with the 6th overall pick, patiently waiting for him to finish his final year of college. Boston was ready for their savior, but there was one massive problem. Larry's agent, Bob Wolf, knew exactly what his client was worth, and he demanded an absolute fortune. He told the Celtics flat out, "Pay us what we want, or Larry will just re-enter the draft and you'll lose him forever." Red Auerbach, a man who didn't take crap from anyone, digging his heels in, famously made his stance clear to the press, stating, "Larry Bird is a cornfield forward. I'm not going to break the bank for a cornfield forward. We've got a lot of pride in this town, and we don't get held up by anyone." Wolf fired right back with equal ice in his veins, countering with a warning that put the entire city of Boston on edge. If we don't get what we feel is fair, Larry will gladly go back to French Lick, play another year of amateur ball, or wait for the next draft. He doesn't need your money to know who he is. It was a terrifying game of high-stakes chicken, with a legendary franchise's future hanging in the balance. At the very last second, with the clock ticking down, Boston blinked. They signed Larry to a 5-year contract worth $3.25 million, making him the highest-paid rookie in the history of professional sports. The pressure was astronomical. A historic, proud franchise in total freefall, a dying NBA league plagued by abysmal TV ratings, and the largest rookie paycheck in history were all resting squarely on the shoulders of a quiet, trash-talking kid from rural Indiana. Could a former garbage truck driver single-handedly save the NBA? If the city of Boston expected a slow transition, Larry Bird had other plans. The Celtics were coming off a miserable, embarrassing 32-win season. They were the laughingstock of the league. But the moment the kid from French Lick stepped onto the parquet floor, everything changed. In just one single season, Larry spearheaded a mind-blowing 32-game turnaround, launching the Celtics to a spectacular 61-21 record. He didn't just play, he completely re-engineered the team's DNA. As a rookie, he led Boston in scoring with 21.3 points, commanded the glass with 10.4 rebounds, and terrorized passing lanes with 143 steals. The entire basketball world couldn't ignore it. Even as a first-year player, he was voted a starter in the 1980 NBA All-Star Game, standing side by side with the absolute icons of the sport. He ran away with the Rookie of the Year award, leaving his college rival Magic Johnson in the dust for round one of their professional war. But winning a regular season crown or an individual trophy wasn't enough for Larry. He wanted a championship. To get it, he would have to survive two of the most brutal, unforgiving postseason runs in NBA history. The rookie's first true postseason test came in the 1980 Eastern Conference semifinals. Waiting for them were the Houston Rockets, a physical, bruising squad that played in the East back then. Houston was anchored by Moses Malone, an absolute, unstoppable monster on the boards who averaged a massive double-double, and a legendary, lightning-quick veteran shooter in Calvin Murphy. They expected to bully the young rookie, but Larry didn't flinch. The Celtics completely overwhelmed Houston. Larry Bird dominated the series, pacing the Celtics with an extraordinary all-around display alongside teammates like Cedric "Cornbread" Maxwell and veteran center Dave Cowens. The Celtics didn't just win, they embarrassed them, completing a dominant 4-0 sweep and closing it out with a crushing 138-121 blowout in Game 4. But then, the rookie ran straight into an absolute brick wall in the 1980 Eastern Conference Finals. The Philadelphia 76ers, led by the legendary, hyper-athletic Julius Dr. J. Irving, who tore up the postseason averaging over 24 points per game, alongside a fierce veteran core featuring the defensive mastermind, Bobby Jones, and past first floor general, Maurice Cheeks. These guys were older, battle-tested, and desperately hungry. They played an overwhelming fast break style of basketball, combined with a suffocating defense that completely neutralized Boston's rhythm. The experienced Sixers exposed the young Celtics. Despite Bird averaging a fierce 21.3 points and 11.2 rebounds across the 1980 playoffs, Boston was completely outmatched, falling in 5 games. The final blow came in a heartbreaking 102-97 loss in Game 5 at home in the Garden. Larry's rookie magical run was officially dead. So who took the 1980 championship home? It was none other than Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers. In an unforgettable finals against those same 76ers, the Lakers played a thrilling, high-octane Showtime style. When Kareem Abdul-Jabbar went down with a severe ankle injury, the rookie Magic shockingly started at center in Game 6, exploding for 42 points, 15 rebounds, and 7 assists to win the title. While Magic was being crowned the king of the NBA, Larry Bird had to sit at home and watch. Failure only made Larry Bird dangerous. First up in the Eastern Conference semifinals, the Chicago Bulls, led by the tough-as-nails 7'2" Artis Gilmore and the smooth-scoring Reggie Theus, the Bulls tried to turn the series into a street fight. They were physical, but Larry completely outsmarted them. Backed by Parrish's interior defense and Nate "Tiny" Archibald's veteran playmaking, the Celtics dismantled Chicago in an absolute masterclass. They executed a ruthless 4-0 sweep, sealing the execution with a dominant 109-103 victory in Game 4. However, what awaited them in the 1981 Eastern Conference Finals wasn't just a team, it was a meat grinder. The ultimate rematch. Julius Irving and the powerhouse Philadelphia 76ers were back, and they were meaner than ever. Dr. J was fresh off winning the regular season MVP award, and they added a terrifying, stone-cold rookie assassin guard named Andrew Toney, nicknamed the Boston Strangler because of how ruthlessly he destroyed the Celtics' defense. They played with an aggressive, physical swagger that completely broke the Celtics early on. Before the city of Boston could even blink, the Celtics fell into a devastating, seemingly impossible 3-1 series deficit. One more loss, and the savior of Boston would be sent packing. The media was already writing their obituaries, yet nobody saw what was coming next. You can never, ever count out Larry Bird. With their backs completely against the wall, the Celtics sparked the most legendary comeback of the decade. In a grueling Game 5 at home, Larry put the entire franchise on his back, erupting for 20 points, 14 massive rebounds, and 4 crucial assists to escape with a heart-stopping 111-109 victory, keeping Boston's beating heart alive. Suddenly, the emotional momentum shifted. The Celtics went into the hostile Philadelphia Spectrum for Game 6. Andrew Toney and Dr. J kept firing, but Bird, McHale, and Parrish fought for every single inch of hardwood. Boston clawed out a gritty, unbelievable 100-98 win, tying the series. It all came down to a legendary Game 7 in the Boston Garden. It was a defensive war. The score was frozen, bodies flying everywhere. With seconds remaining and the game tied, Larry Bird drove the lane, pulled up, and let loose a high-arching, impossible bank shot. Splash! Boston won Game 7 by a single point, 91-90, completing a historic comeback from 3-1 down. The 76ers were broken. The Garden went into absolute pandemonium. They marched straight into the 1981 NBA Finals to face the Houston Rockets, a dangerous, gritty squad that had pulled off a miracle postseason run of their own, anchored yet again by Moses Malone, who punished teams ruthlessly by averaging over 26 points and 14 rebounds on the glass. Houston was experienced, physical, and ready to shock the world. But Larry's basketball IQ was operating on a completely different dimension. During Game 1, Bird pulled off a play that legendary coach Red Auerbach called one of the greatest he had ever witnessed. Larry launched a mid-range jumper from the right wing. The second it left his fingertips, he knew it was short. While everyone else stood completely still, watching the ball, Bird sprinted to the baseline, caught the bouncing ball out of midair with his right hand, and in one fluid, gravity-defying motion, switched it to his left hand to lay it in before his feet ever touched the ground. The Rockets fought hard, tying the series at 2-2 behind Moses Malone's bruising interior play. But Larry and the Celtics were too deep, too smart, and too relentless. While Bird orchestrated the offense, averaging 21.9 points, 14.0 rebounds, and 6.1 assists for the entire playoffs, it was Cedric "Cornbread" Maxwell who exploded in the final games, averaging 17.7 points and 9.5 rebounds to capture the Finals MVP award. Boston pulled away, winning Games 5 and 6 by double digits, capturing the series 4-2 with a definitive 102-91 blowout in the finale. At just 24 years old, the former garbage truck driver had conquered his demons, saved his city, and secured Boston's very first NBA championship since 1969. And this was only the beginning. You would think winning a championship at 24 meant Larry Bird was going to cruise through the rest of the decade, but what happened next threatened to tear his legendary status to pieces. Before Larry could touch the mountaintop again, he had to endure absolute heartbreak. In 1982, the Celtics marched back to the Eastern Conference Finals for a trilogy with Julius Erving and the Philadelphia 76ers. But this time, the magic ran out. Larry's playoff production plummeted to a shocking 17.8 points per game, and the older, hungrier Sixers extracted their revenge, outmuscling Boston in a grueling 7-game series. If 1982 was a disappointment, 1983 was a complete disaster. The Celtics ran into the Milwaukee Bucks, a team coached by Don Nelson that played a revolutionary, hyper-aggressive defensive scheme. They suffocated Larry, holding him to terrible shooting percentages. And then the unthinkable occurred. The proud, mighty Boston Celtics were swept 4-0. Disgrace. The media began to turn. Was Larry Bird just a flash in the pan? Had Magic Johnson, who already had 2 championships under his belt, permanently pulled ahead in the race for basketball supremacy? Everything changed when the 1983-84 season arrived. Larry Bird didn't just want to win anymore. He wanted to destroy everyone who doubted him. He put together an absolute regular season masterpiece, averaging 24.2 points, 10.1 rebounds, and 6.6 assists, capturing his very first regular season MVP award. But the real trial awaited him team in the postseason. First up in the opening round, the Washington Bullets, led by the terrifyingly physical Bruise Brothers duo of Jeff Ruland and Rick Mahorn. Ruland was a monster, averaging 24 points and nearly 13 rebounds in the series, turning the paint into a total crime scene. But Larry was on a different mission. In Game 1, Bird dropped a masterful 23 points, 14 rebounds, and 12 assists, triple-double, to lead Boston to an opening 91-83 victory. Washington punched back in Game 3, stealing an 111-108 overtime win. But Larry closed the casket in Game 4, putting up a relentless 21 points and 13 boards as Boston won 99-96, closing out the series 3-1. However, the Eastern Conference semifinals brought a completely different beast, the New York Knicks, and they were led by Bernard King, a scoring machine who was having one of the most legendary playoff hot streaks in NBA history, averaging an unreal 29 points a game in the series. It was a point-for-point heavyweight slugfest that went the absolute distance. The series swung back and forth like a pendulum. Larry was pushing through exhaustion, averaging 30.4 points and 11.2 rebounds over the 7 games. In the do-or-die Game 7 inside a chaotic Boston Garden, Larry completely out-dueled King. Bird put up a spectacular 39-point, 12-rebound, 10-assist triple-double, leading the Celtics to a crushing 121-104 blowout victory. The Eastern Conference Finals were a matter of pure revenge. The Milwaukee Bucks, the very same squad that had embarrassingly swept them a year prior. They were led by Sidney Moncrief, a perimeter defender so elite he won back-to-back Defensive Player of the Year awards. But Larry had their blueprint this time. With Kevin McHale and Robert Parrish dominating the interior, Larry picked the Bucks' defense apart. Boston completely flipped the script from the previous year, dismantling Milwaukee in a commanding 5 games. The final blow was a definitive 115-108 win in Game 5. The East had been conquered. Larry Bird had punched his ticket back to the grandest stage, but there was one problem. Waiting for him in the finals were Magic Johnson and the Los Angeles Lakers, the ultimate dream matchup. The two icons hadn't faced each other with a championship on the line since that fateful college night in 1979. What happened next shocked the sports world. It became the most brutal, atmospheric, and legendary finals in NBA history. The Lakers arrived with their lightning-fast Showtime offense, and early on, they completely ran the Celtics off their own floor. LA stole Game 1 in Boston, 115-109, behind 32 points from Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Boston narrowly escaped Game 2 in overtime, but when the series shifted to Los Angeles for Game 3, the Lakers absolutely humiliated them. A 33-point blowout loss, the largest margin of defeat in Celtics finals history. Magic Johnson was dancing on the court, racking up a historic 21 assists. Larry Bird was completely disgusted. He walked into the post-game press conference, looked at the reporters, and tore into his own teammates with a legendary quote that changed the entire series. "We played like sissies. We didn't contest shots. We didn't rebound. We played like a bunch of soft guys who were just happy to be here." Message received. Game 4 turned into an absolute war zone. The Celtics stopped trying to outplay the Lakers. They decided to physically break them. Everything changed when Kurt Rambis stole a pass and broke away for a layup. Out of nowhere, Kevin McHale intercepted him, clotheslining Rambis directly by the neck and slamming him violently into the hardwood. The fight was on. It wasn't a basketball game anymore. It was a street fight. The Lakers were rattled. Larry took advantage of the chaos, tracking down a staggering 21 rebounds and hitting an impossible game-winning baseline jumper over Magic Johnson in overtime to secure a 129-125 victory, tying the series 2-2. Then came Game 5 back in Boston. It went down in history as the Heat game. The old Boston Garden had absolutely no air conditioning, and a massive summer heat wave struck the city. The temperature inside the arena soared past a suffocating 100 degrees. It was an absolute sauna. The rubber on the players' sneakers was literally melting onto the parquet floor. The Lakers, used to their pristine, air-conditioned California arena, completely wilted in the oppressive environment. But Larry Bird? Remember where he came from. He looked at the sweltering gym and smiled. He told reporters after the game, "I'm from French Lick. I used to play in gyms hotter than this all summer long. This feels like home." Larry completely owned the night, exploding for 34 points on an incredible 15 of 20 shooting performance, pulling down 17 rebounds to lead Boston to a dominant 121-103 victory. It all came down to a legendary Game 7 in Boston. The entire world was watching. Kareem scored 29. Magic dished out 15 assists, but the Celtics' grit was too much. Cedric Maxwell stepped up with 24 points. Robert Parrish anchored the glass with 16 boards, and Larry Bird directed the entire symphony. The Celtics captured a thrilling 111-102 victory. Larry Bird averaged an extraordinary 27.4 points and 14.0 rebounds for the series, capturing the Finals MVP award and securing his ultimate redemption against Magic Johnson. The kid who was pulling trash cans in rural Indiana just a few years prior was now the undisputed king of the basketball world. But true icons don't just win crowns, they build empires. And Larry was about to unleash a reign of terror the NBA would never forget. If 1984 was about redemption, the next 2 years were about pure, absolute domination. Larry Bird wasn't just resting on his championship laurels. He was about to put together a multi-year peak so staggeringly efficient, it would leave the entire league completely helpless. Fresh off his first title over Magic, Larry leveled up his game for the 1984-85 season, putting up a ridiculous stat line: 28.7 points, 10.5 rebounds, and 6.6 assists per game. He was scoring at will, pulling down boards, and running the offense like a seasoned quarterback. But his defining moment that year didn't even happen in the playoffs. It happened on a random Tuesday night in March against the Atlanta Hawks. Just 9 days earlier, his teammate Kevin McHale had set a Celtics franchise record by scoring 56 points. Larry, being the ultimate competitor, casually told him he should have gone for 60. Then, he went out and did it himself. Against the physical Hawks team, Larry exploded for a historic, franchise record 60 points.
60 points. Larry Bird scored 60 points.
He poured in 32 of those points in an unbelievable 14-minute second-half blitz, hitting circus shots from every square inch of the hardwood. It was such a surreal masterpiece that even the opposing Atlanta Hawks bench couldn't help but leap out of their seats and celebrate his shots. After the game, Hawks superstar Dominique Wilkins could only shake his head, saying he was living in a video game. It couldn't be real. By the time the regular season wrapped up, the league had no choice but to hand Larry his second consecutive regular season MVP award. He had conquered the regular season, but the ultimate prize slipped through his fingers when a grueling rematch with the Lakers in the 1985 Finals ended in a heartbreaking 6-game defeat. Larry took that loss personally, and what he did next in the 1985-86 season isn't just basketball lore. It's arguably the greatest individual and team campaign in NBA history. The 1985-86 Boston Celtics were an absolute juggernaut, tearing through the league to win 67 games, including an unprecedented 41 record on their home floor. And right at the center of the storm was Larry. He captured his third consecutive regular season MVP award, joining an exclusive club of legends and becoming the first and only forward in NBA history to achieve a three-peat as MVP. His confidence had reached mythical levels. To truly understand the legend of Larry Bird, you have to look at February 8, 1986. The NBA was hosting its very first official three-point shootout during All-Star Weekend at the Reunion Arena in Dallas. The league had gathered an absolute murderer's row of pure shooters to inaugurate the event. Guys like sweeping marksman Craig Hodges, lethal sniper Dale Ellis, and sleepwalking scorer Sleepy Floyd. They were all nervous, hyper-focused, and practicing intensely on the floor. Then, Larry walked in. He didn't stretch, he didn't put on his game shoes right away, he just stood in the doorway of the locker room, looked his peers dead in the eyes, and uttered the ice-cold phrase that became instant basketball folklore. "I'm just looking around to see who's gonna finish second." He wasn't bluffing. While other players meticulously warmed up, Larry went out onto the Reunion Arena floor and didn't even bother to take off his green and white Celtics warm-up jacket for the opening rounds. He advanced effortlessly. It all came down to the final round against Craig Hodges. Hodges posted a formidable score, forcing Larry to dig deep. With the clock ticking down and the pressure suffocating the arena, Bird found his rhythm, systematically painting the corners. Swish! He captured the inaugural 1986 crown with an unforgettable display of pure arrogance and mechanical perfection.
I knew I was going to win this thing. I've been practicing. My teammates said I wasn't going to win it, but I came back and lucked out.
But the true coronation came in the 1986 NBA Finals against Hakeem Olajuwon, Ralph Sampson, and the Twin Towers of the Houston Rockets. Larry completely orchestrated the series, averaging an elite 24.0 points, 9.7 rebounds, and 9.5 assists across the postseason. In the decisive Game 6 inside a raucous Boston Garden, Larry put on a vintage clinic, racking up a masterful 29-point, 11-rebound, 12-assist triple-double to secure a 114-97 blowout victory. The Boston Celtics were champions once again, and Larry Bird claimed his second Finals MVP trophy. Between 1984 and 1986, Larry Bird won 3 MVPs, 2 NBA championships, and 2 Finals MVPs. It was a 3-year stretch of undisputed basketball perfection. The hick from French Lick had completely subjugated the sport, but the basketball gods are notoriously cruel. And just as Larry reached the absolute apex of his powers, an unexpected, agonizing enemy was waiting in the shadows to break him. Every empire has its downfall. For most kings, it's an ambitious young rival or a better team. But for Larry Bird, his greatest enemy wasn't Magic Johnson. It wasn't the rising Detroit Pistons. It was his own unyielding, stubborn pride. In the summer of 1985, right in the absolute middle of his historic MVP three-piece, Larry went back home to Indiana. He wanted to build a house for his mother, but instead of hiring a construction crew, the millionaire global icon decided to shovel and lay a massive, multi-ton gravel driveway all by himself. He spent days bent over, lifting heavy rock in the suffocating heat, and then his back gave out. He suffered a severe, debilitating misaligned vertebra. It was an injury that would have sidelined most players for a season, but Larry, possessing a borderline psychotic tolerance for pain, refused to stop.
He could manage the pain in a way that very few people can do.
He played through the entire legendary 1986 championship season with a ticking time bomb in his spine. But by 1987, the bill came due. The Celtics were breaking down, and a brutal, young, hyper-aggressive rival had arrived to dethrone them, Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons. They didn't just want to beat Boston, they wanted to physically destroy them. The 1987 Eastern Conference Finals became a legendary, blood-soaked war. By Game 5, the series was deadlocked at 2-2. With just 5 seconds remaining on the clock, the Celtics were down by 1 point. Isaiah Thomas stood on the baseline, ready to inbound the ball and seal the game for Detroit. The Garden crowd was dead silent, but nobody saw what was coming next. With superhuman instincts, Larry anticipated the pass, intercepted it out of midair, and while falling out of bounds, twisted his broken body to fire a perfect pass to Dennis Johnson for the game-winning layup. It was arguably the greatest, most iconic steal in the history of professional basketball. But the Magic couldn't hide the agony forever. In 1988, the Pistons finally overpowered the exhausted Celtics. Shortly after, Larry's body completely collapsed. He required major surgery to remove bone spurs from both of his heels, forcing him to miss all but 6 games of the 1988-89 season. When he returned, he wasn't the same. His back had deteriorated so badly that he could no longer sit on the bench. Think about that visual. One of the most arrogant, dominant, larger-than-life superstars in human history, reduced to lying on the floor like a broken soldier just to keep his spine from locking up. He was in constant, agonizing pain. Every single jump shot felt like a knife being driven into his lower back. Yet, even as a ghost of himself, he refused to die quietly. It all culminated in Game 5 of the 1991 first round against the Indiana Pacers. In the second quarter, Larry dived for a loose ball, slamming his head and back violently into the hardwood. He was helped off the floor, severely concussed, and unable to walk straight. The crowd watched in somber silence as he disappeared down the tunnel. The Celtics fell behind, and the season was slipping away. But what happened next shocked the sports world. Like a real-life superhero movie, Larry Bird walked back onto the parquet floor. With his vision blurred and his back screaming in agony, he put together a performance that cemented his myth forever. He scored 32 points on pure, unadulterated willpower, leading the Celtics to an emotional, impossible 124-121 victory to save the season. He had given everything he had left to the city of Boston, but the tank was completely empty. The Indiana Miracle was the last great stand of a broken warrior. By 1992, the agonizing reality of his body could no longer be ignored. Larry Bird's historic, relentless 13-year playing career had reached its inevitable conclusion. But he had one final, immortal task left as a player. In the summer of 1992, despite a back that required constant medical attention, Larry was named co-captain of the most legendary collection of basketball talent ever assembled, the Dream Team. Alongside Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan, a fading Larry Bird subbed into the games, providing veteran leadership and elite shooting efficiency. In the gold medal game against Croatia, Larry dug deep one final time, contributing 14 points to secure an emphatic 117-85 victory. He stood on the podium, a gold medal draped around his neck, finally conquering the international stage. Days later, on August 18, 1992, Larry Bird officially announced his retirement from the NBA. He walked away from the game with a staggering 21,791 points, 8,974 rebounds, and 5,695 assists, averaging a historic 24.3 points, 10.0 rebounds, and 6.3 assists per game.
I dedicated my life to basketball, and I dedicated my life to the Boston Celtics. My basketball career is officially over, and I had a blast.
But true basketball geniuses never truly leave the court. Larry immediately transitioned into the front office, serving as a special assistant for the Celtics until 1997. Then, he went back home to Indiana. Taking over as the head coach of the Indiana Pacers in 1997, he brought his ruthless competitive intelligence to the sidelines. He immediately led the franchise to 3 straight Eastern Conference Finals and their very first NBA Finals appearance in 2000, capturing the 1998 NBA Coach of the Year award. In 2003, he climbed even higher, becoming the Pacers' president of basketball operations. He built powerhouse teams that consistently fought at the top of the East, earning the 2012 NBA Executive of the Year award. With that final trophy, Larry Bird cemented a legacy that will likely never be matched in human history. He became the first and only person to win Rookie of the Year, regular season MVP, Finals MVP, Coach of the Year, and Executive of the Year. He had completely mastered every single level of professional basketball. When people look back at the 1980s, they talk about how Magic and Larry saved the NBA. They talk about the flash, the scoring, and the fierce, unyielding rivalry. But what truly defined Larry Bird wasn't just the winning, it was the impossible standard he set for anyone who ever dared to pick up a basketball. Years later, reflecting on his journey from pulling trash cans in French Lick to sitting at the absolute apex of global sports, Larry perfectly captured his relationship with the game. When asked about his competitive drive and what it took to face the world night after night, he casually looked back and gave a quote that defines his entire mythos. "When I was a player, I never looked at the guy I was matching up against. People always asked me who I was competing against out there. I told them, nobody. It's just me.